start with the main event and talk about the main event. What we think about the main event. Um, yeah, I guess I'll let you. I guess I'll let you take this one.
It was a wild one. It was a wild, wild main event. I've had, we've had 2, 3 days to kind of process it now. Um, Brought my thoughts around it. A little bit back down to earth more than Saturday night. Yeah, really, really wild. I mean, going into this, it was so strange. Like going into this, it was like the general MMA fandom was dead set that Conor was going to sleep him probably in the first round without much difficulty, more so than in the Cowboy fight, which in retrospect is very strange. Um, but it was just so shocking. It was such a shocking result when um, Dustin starts tearing up the leg with that low calf kick, and Conor just comes unraveled so fast. Um, yeah, God, that this whole division. There's so many options and ways this thing can go now. Lightweight is just incredibly hot and exciting at the time. Um, yeah, love it. Love everything. Lightweight's incredible right now. What do you think?
Yeah, there was a lot made of the punching power of McGregor, but not as much was made, and it's surprising. It's a surprising. It was surprising at the time. It's especially surprising in hindsight that not as much was made about the durability of Poirier.
Yeah,
And Poirier said after the fight that McGregor did land a really solid left hand, and Poirier was honest after the fight that he said if McGregor would have known I was hurt and he would have poured it on, I may not be celebrating right now. So the increased durability of Poirier has as much to do with his victory as those leg kicks, and the leg kicks are really an interesting wrinkle to this loss. Um, and I'm curious what you think about it. First off, the X's and O's of it. The leg kicks were clearly making a difference, but it was almost like an on off switch. I mean, you can really see in the replay of the events leading up to the stoppage when Poirier turns McGregor around onto the fence. He gets his back off the fence, and McGregor just doesn't move. And McGregor spoke after the fact that his leg was dead. And when you watch that replay, you really can tell, like McGregor, it it may have been a gas issue. I don't think it was, but what it really looked like was he was just totally immobilized. He could not move. His leg was dead. You see him try and use it, but he just couldn't move. And when he's a sit and duck like that, Poirier is a good enough boxer that it just McGregor can't use his head movement as well because he can't rock back and forth between his feet. It must have been horrifying, honestly, for McGregor to be totally immobilized like that. It certainly proved a lot to Poirier. It has certainly changed the way a lot of people think about McGregor. And I think it's a real gut check moment for McGregor as much as it is the peak of a mountain for Poirier.
yes. I mean, definitely without um, making it too obvious. This is the lowest of the come to terms moments for Connor. I mean, the biggest thing about the leg kick that was so concerning to me was he showed in previous fights. It's been years now. At least an awareness of how to do something about it and try to prevent it in some ways. He had to do that against Chad Mendez, and he's had to do it in the past. And coming into this fight or early on in the very beginning when he's fresh, he just wasn't displaying any of those things. I mean, it's been made the big deal about him training primarily with just in a boxing format for these MMA fights, and he's really not kind of in that bouncing around, kicking, stance he was doing at featherweight a lot on his way up. But it's just I think he's just in a spot where it's like, I mean, even coming up to this, right? He's talking all this stuff about how he's going to go box Manny Pacquiao after this, and um, he's got his head all over the place. He's got to pick one thing and commit to it. Like if he's wants to come back and become UFC lightweight champion, he's got to go all in on that. Or if he wants to go box, then go box, and don't do this because you're only getting fucked up when you come over here. If you're going to be fighting top three, top two guys in the world, and you're coming over here like not fully focused on MMA, I mean it's gonna be bad, and it's only gonna hurt your stock over here. So he's talking, Connor's talking after this like he wants this immediate uh, third fight with Dustin. That does nothing for me right now. I mean, Dustin to me clearly needs to be fighting for the belt next, unquestionably. We'll get more into that after we talk about the co-main event, but very interesting places that they now find themselves in their career. I want Conor to stick around MMA. I want him to keep fighting in MMA. But a couple things need to happen. One, he needs to turn all of his focus back onto it, and he needs to pick a goal like, I'm going to become lightweight champion again, or something to work towards. And then his next fight, we got to get him back on track. I don't want to see him immediately into a third Dustin fight after this. Um, like a Tony. Like a Tony fight is where Conor should be going next for me. Where it's like, I mean, shit, the rankings are out. The new rankings are out. Conor McGregor is number 6 at lightweight in the world right now, it's wild. That's crazy. But I mean, in retrospect, he's only ever fought a lightweight twice, and he's 1-1. But it's just a wild thing, like it's crazy. He's all the way down at number 6 and at lightweight right now. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah, man. Who'd ever think that we would be asking where Ido Portal is?
Seriously,
A
yeah,
little bit. He
seriously,
needed maybe a little bit more touch butt in the park and a little bit less childhood boxing coach.
yeah,
Um, it's it was an odd performance, and the thing is, like, there was a lot of talk about like his movement or whatever. I didn't read into it that much, honestly. I didn't really care to. um I trust that the fighters, especially the Pinnacle, like, why would a fighter not fight the same way in this fight versus that fight? I don't know, man. I kind of trust like the professional athletes and the professional coaches to, especially at the pinnacle of the game, to approach fights differently. Like, not like try and square peg round hole things. So I mean, there was a lot made about his lack of movement, and I think to a certain degree we could blame believing in his power a little bit too much, because McGregor has only taken more damage as his career has gone on. He's been willing to take more damage as his career has gone on. Um, and in this one, it seemed like he really did believe like he just needed one good shot and was willing to just kind of. He fought with a posture. He really, that at least I'll say what I felt was strange. His
yeah.
posture, his posture was tight, man. It was really well, it was boxing esque.
Boxing, like, yeah. You
Yeah.
actually bring up a great point. Let's revisit a topic that we mentioned last week or the week before. We mentioned Connor's touch of death. In retrospect, now that I'm thinking about it over the past couple of days, it's proven to exist at featherweight, of course. It was proven to not exist at welterweight. And we all assumed it existed at lightweight. But before this, we'd only ever seen him fight Eddie Alvarez. And I would argue that now that wasn't necessarily touch of death, and I'm starting to think that maybe he doesn't have that like 60-second one punch dead people in at lightweight. And if that's the case, man, lightweight just got totally different because going into this, I'm like, man, Connor would dust Dustin, which means he would dust Gaethje. Dude, coming out of this, I'm like, man, Gaethje's a bad matchup for Connor. Gaethje starts kicking that leg super crazy, get them hands going. I think it's before this fight, I'm like, ooh, man, Gaethje terrible. He gets lit up by
Uh,
Connor. Now I'm like, I don't know.
I'm not sure. I'm ready to just write off McGregor's power. I think that he has. I think that McGregor still has the ability to, especially if we're just talking about one weapon, because ultimately that is the narrative that has developed. That's going to be how the narrative develops in an eventual rematch. Is has McGregor fixed that defensive hole? And I have a feeling that because whether he's fully dedicated or not, I would imagine McGregor is dedicated enough to not want to get his ass kicked again. So I would imagine that leg kick. I would imagine the leg kick's going to get fixed. But that's the thing with that calf kick is there really is no other than not getting hit by it. There's really not much you can do. You really have to turn that leg out, and if you don't do it really well, I mean, you get chewed up either way. Um, McGregor didn't really kick a lot. He really, again, like it's really this over reliance on the hands in a sport that when you look at the way McGregor spoke years prior, younger him seemed to understand that this was not a game of hands and it was a game of weapons, multiple weapons. And it seemed like in this fight, he really bought into the fact that he really only needed two. Um, Although he did land some good elbows, but he struck me as a fighter who because this was a big again another big narrative going into the fight is we don't have a lot of footage of the guy. He says he's training, he says he's working on stuff. He says he's always in the gym, working with dudes, whatever. How much has he developed? How much has he evolved even though he's had time out of the octagon? And again, I don't like this immediate. I mean, it's what we do. It's we talk about what things mean or whatever, but I don't want to overstate it. But the feeling I have right now, a few days removed, is he does not seem like a guy who has developed in the same way that the sport as a whole has developed.
No, he hasn't. If anything, he's regressed while
Yeah.
The talent level at lightweight has rapidly expanded in the time that he's gone. I mean, in looking back, he's really lucky in the timing that he was able to get that lightweight title fight because, like, man, if he would have missed the window to get that lightweight title fight by like 6 months or even a year, Khabib would have got there first, and he would have never gotten to be lightweight champion. Um, Yeah, I mean, it's really something like that. I mean, when he was there before, the top of the division was RDA, Eddie Alvarez, Cerrone. Now, like lightweight is, I mean, there's five guys ranked above him right now. It's crazy.
Yeah, and it's a thing of like what's next. You had mentioned Tony, a fight I like. You had mentioned, well, did you mention Nate?
I will after we talk about the
Yeah.
co-main event. We can talk about kind of matching everybody.
I have some of his stuff pulled up as well. Um, there are options for McGregor, but the McGregor it's a blessing and a curse, the situation that McGregor's in. It's the same thing as a thing we'll unfortunately talk about later, which is like um well, I mean it's not a curse for them, but like Connor is in a similar spot that like a Paul brother is
Yeah,
in all reality. There is no way for Conor to truly um, rejuvenate himself as far as rebuilding himself. There is no true way for him to do so in the way that a fighter normally would. Like he has let's say he loses again. Let's say he faces down with Tony Ferguson, loses again. A normal fighter would then go to like, if they're a pretty big star, they would go to like maybe the first fight on the main card or the prelims, and they would fight someone like Jim Miller, or they would fight someone like a who just fought like a Nick Lentz. Well, you're not going to fight Nick Lentz anymore because he retired. Bye, Nick Lentz. Thank you for the career and whatnot. Side note. But McGregor just does not have the opportunity to do that. He'll never have the opportunity to do that. And I don't think he wants the opportunity to do that. He wants every time he fights to be a spectacle because he wants to make a shit ton of money. But with that comes like every fight is massive, and there's no way for you to quietly rebuild yourself on the undercard and then move your way back up into some bigger stuff. Every time you fight, there's a magnifying glass on you, and it's just going to make your ability to draw, which is like this counterintuitive thing, by constantly making every fight a thing where you try and draw people. The more you fail, the less you will draw, and it'll become this thing of like eventually you just won't be able to draw anymore because people won't care because
Yeah.
you lose.
Which is interesting to me because I felt like in the lead up to this fight, he was kind of laying the groundwork for a little bit of this stuff. In terms of like still talking about wanting the Ally Quinta fight, talking extensively about wanting to still fight Ally Quinta, which didn't make any sense. But now I'm like, that makes all the sense in the world. And it's like any Conor fight, regardless of who it is, Donald Cerrone, anybody, right? At a one-off fight at welterweight, it's a pay-per-view main event. It doesn't have to be for anything. It's just Conor fights a guy. If you can get Conor against a guy that he can argue and beef against, and a guy that's not going to sit up there and be buddy buddy with him, even if it's a number 11 or 12 in the world ranked Ally Quinta, you can get him up on stage with him. They can talk some shit to each other. I think you can work with that. You can get Conor out there to smoke a fool, get him get him back on track. Be like, okay, cool. Now let's put you in a third Diaz fight. Now let's do something cool with you. If he's trying to fight 4 times, this year, which is the thing where like I think Dana might be still working with this thing, being like, well, maybe 1 or 2 more fights, and that's all we're going to get out of Conor. So we need to maximize it, make them the biggest fights we can, which is a stupid plan because you got Conor being like, I'm trying to be active. Great, let's get you a big win. Let's get you a nice knockout win over somebody that's not an elite top 5 guy. Let's pick anyone down the rankings, somebody ranked lower than you. And let's get you a win. Because I'm not like, it is all bad. If you put him in against another elite guy and he gets beat badly again, we're looking at like he's already in a bad spot. We're at like what 2 and 3 in his last 5, right?
Yeah, I mean he's not done spectacularly, right? He yeah, he's lost 2 in a row. No, he's won. He is, yeah, 2,
Alternating. He keeps
1 and
winning.
2. He's 1 and 2 in his last 3, and that one was against an aged Cowboy Cerrone
He's another one
who
of those.
didn't really show up. Yeah, and I guess the phrase I was looking for before was you can't put the genie back in the bottle.
Yeah.
And the same is true for his pay. Yeah, he wants to be super active, but the price he commands is just too high. I mean, it has to be from the UFC side, granted, a fighter pays a mess. So ultimately, it doesn't have to be this way. It's a choice by the ownership. But under the current choice by the ownership, for McGregor to make 5 million to show, do you think he's going to agree to make less just so he can fight more? I doubt it.
Yeah,
So for him to fight more, every fight has to be a spectacle, or the UFC is not interested in paying him as much as he normally commands.
yeah.
Um,
Something that I found very interesting about this was, you recall, before or after the Cerrone fight, uh, McGregor fights Cerrone. Cerrone comes out and it's like, "Yo, y'all, I didn't make shit money for this because he did not renegotiate his contract when he signed to fight Conor. So when he fought Conor, he did not get any pay-per-view points, and he got just his flat money that he normally makes, right? So Cowboy didn't make anything to fight Conor. Um, uh, Poirier, right, over this last year, they've had all these problems with Poirier being like, "Y'all aren't paying me enough," after that Hooker fight, right, trying to renegotiate his contract, and they were having all this beef. Eventually, they folded and renegotiated his contract before this rematch with McGregor, and he got pay-per-view points off of this card. Um, so he made bank. Poirier turned around and made hella money off of this, and Cerrone got screwed over in that last fight. So it's like the UFC knows what they're doing. They know if there's a situation, they're gonna where they can screw over the other guy and be like, "Oh, we need to pay Connor. We're not gonna pay you nothing." They will. But there are two different types of people. Like, Dustin Poirier is clearly going to be your next lightweight champion, or at least contending for your next lightweight championship. So you got to position him that way. But I thought that was very interesting the way they did those two guys.
well, I guess we'll move into that, right? Because there's a lot of talk about Connor, but we got to give the man his time in the sun. Dustin Poirier, dude, comes back. It is a when I was talking about Chandler, right, when he won, I used the word vindication, and I think the same word is accurate for Poirier in this victory. It vindicates him in a way um, that's different. A win for McGregor would have vindicated him. It would have proven that he's still on top. Um, to Poirier, this win proved that hard work matters and showing up matters and working, working hard over the long haul will eventually win you the day, and that's what happened. And this is a fight because after the fight, Poirier was saying that, um, we'll mention it here, or at least I will. Michael Chandler stopped Dan Hooker in 2 minutes 30 seconds. Amazing. He vindicated his entire career with that 2 minutes and 30 seconds. Proved to the world that yes, this whole time he was truly elite. The general MMA community figured, oh, this is a 4-man tournament. Oliveira doesn't speak English, so he's probably gonna get screwed over anyway. There's a 4-man tournament to determine probably who's gonna fight for the belt next. Because everyone except for Dana White, I'm not sure if Dana White himself is just incredibly wishful, or he thinks the MMA community as a whole is like dumb or whatever. But I mean, we all knew Khabib was just not coming back. Um, but Dustin Poirier, after the fight, had the air of a guy who really didn't feel, um, after this win, especially, doesn't feel pushed to do this anymore. He's like, I do so much stuff. This is just a thing I do. What did you make of his post fight uh, comments?
Yeah, I mean, this is a guy that's been here forever. I mean, he's been doing this, since he was like 18. Um, I'm sure he sees not necessarily it being that close, but he sees the end approaching, the end of his career approaching. He's taken a lot of damage. He's getting beat up a lot. Poirier is not a guy that I expect to see fighting until he's 41, 42. I expect him to win the belt, defend it as many times as he can, and as soon as he loses that belt, he's gone. That's a wrap on Dustin Poirier. Um, but that's all totally earned and deserved. I don't have a problem with any of that. I mean, this guy's been here forever, fighting at featherweight, going up to lightweight, going on this insane run. Only 2 losses at lightweight in that whole time. Yeah, excellent, excellent. Biggest win of his career. Hard work beats talent every time. Yeah, it was just a wonderful win for him. Now, in looking at what you do next with him, it's really only 2 options. It's either Oliveira or Michael Chandler. Now, I've been going back and forth. Well, I mean, those are the 2 realistic options. I mean, you can throw out there the immediate third fight with Conor or doing a fight with Nate because that was a fight that people are talking about that they had before it was canceled, which I'm not opposed to it. Dustin versus Nate would be a great fight. Don't want Nate to stroll in back into lightweight and get this title fight. So realistically to me, you're looking at your options of Michael Chandler or Oliveira. Now, I'm very torn. I've been going back and forth. I agree with Dustin that Oliveira is the one that deserves it. Oliveira is the guy that's also been cutting his teeth in the UFC, got the wins over other UFC guys. He's the one that's actually more deserving of it.
Yep.
He's the one that probably should get the shot.
Yep.
But, the more I've been thinking about this, the situation that the UFC had, right? So they signed Michael Chandler. They're like, all right, we got this guy. We just signed him to a big contract. He's at the end of his career. We want to do big things with him. He's been the face of Bellator. People know who he is for the most part. He has a knownness about him. So I'm going to put him as the backup for this Khabib fight, right? They throw him into this very high-profile position for a backup Khabib fight. You don't actually need him there. So still, you got him as a high-profile spot. You cut a promo with him on the TV during the pay-per-view, and then you book him in a big, high-profile co-main event on the Conor pay-per-view. You stack all the cards in his favor, right? You give him the biggest platform that you possibly can. They did all that. And then on top of them doing everything they possibly could, Michael Chandler delivered everything that he possibly could on his end. He had the best performance he possibly could on the biggest stage with the most eyeballs on him. And I think Michael Chandler he speaks English. He's way more marketable than Charles Oliveira is. And they're cool with each other, but there's enough heat there that if they book Dustin versus Michael Chandler, Dustin's going to be like, I'll take the fight, but like, I'm going to say, you don't really deserve to be here fighting me. We'll talk a little bit of shit. And in the end, I think that's what's going to happen. I think it's going to be Dustin versus Chandler for the belt. And I think I do. I think
Dustin straight up said no.
He is no, and I understand it. And I understand his perspective on it. But I mean, if you're the UFC, you just put all your chips in the Chandler corner, and then he delivered. I mean, you cash out. You cash out on Chandler.
Here's the thing no one's talking about. Is there possibly a way that Poirier gets left out of the title conversation?
Fuck, I would hope
he's not. If the UFC really wants Chandler in there, Dustin Poirier is not going to budge. Do you think they book Chandler Oliveira?
Only I could say yes, but only if they go to Dustin and they're like, yo, we want to do either the third fight with Conor right now or like Diaz or some other like big money fight with you. Because that's think about it. Dustin versus Diaz, main event of a pay-per-view right now, 1.5 million buys, and it's for nothing.
Yeah. I mean, if Poirier is true to his word, because Poirier, he goes back and forth on this in his interviews. He says he's the best in the world. He knows he's the champion. With Khabib gone, he knows he's the best in the world. He knows he's the champion. But he also admits that the one thing he has never done is undisputed lightweight champion. And he kind of talks out of both sides of his mouth in this way, where I think he's trying to do a negotiation type thing of like, I could take it or leave it. I already know I'm the best, blah, blah, blah. But then, like, the sportsman side of him comes out and he's like, yeah, but I really do want that on paper. I really do want the
Yeah.
history books to mark me down as undisputed. And listen, the UFC's done a lot of stuff. They booked Dan Henderson against Michael Bisping for a title defense. So like it's possible that they'll like just book some stuff for a world title, but I really just cannot see them booking Nate Diaz. I think it's more likely that Nate Diaz comes back against Conor than he does against Poirier for a world title.
Yeah, I'm down with that. I mean, honestly, if you're going to throw Nate back into the 55 equation, I'm down with Nate versus Gaethje. They got a little thing going now. Gaethje did an interview today, um, talking some mess about Nate. I'm down with that too. Um, there's a lot of options there. I mean, you can't really go wrong in any direction. Um, but it will be interesting how they try to match make this stuff because
I mean, it's been
Dustin, it's
said.
another thing too. Dustin, right? Dustin's training with and shoulder to shoulder with Masvidal every day, and like him and Masvidal are in a similar situation where they got a fight that blew their stock up, right? And they're like at an all time high. But unlike Connor and Nate, where that level of hype just kind of like persists based off of their personality and regardless of like who they fight next, I think that they take a couple of losses, it's gone. Their type of hype because their personalities aren't that type of way, and so I think Poirier is probably very hip to the idea that's like, okay, I now like I'm a big deal now. A lot of people just saw eyes on me and like me alone versus the right next person to probably do over 1 million pay-per-view buys. I need to like maximize this, while I'm here. So like he wants his next fight to be something big. Which a Nate fight would be big. Oliveira just wouldn't, Oliveira's just I love Oliveira to death and skill wise he's the actual guy that deserves it, but I'm consistently
That's a
thinking that the hype is not behind him. The UFC's
that is
not
a
out.
horribly tough fight, man.
It is.
That is like a real. He is a real capital G guy in the UFC lightweight division,
Yeah.
and a dude who you really, when you're doing your Michael Chandler visualizations in your head, he could beat any of them,
Yeah.
and you can see him being able to beat any of them. The Oliveira, um, granted, like someone could probably play this back one day on me, but the Oliveira who gets folded up like a lawn chair, that guy's just not here anymore. So like the vision I have of Oliveira, just he needs the moment he faces a tough, hard hitting wrestler, he's just gonna fold up. That guy's just not. That's just not who we're dealing with anymore. We're dealing with a mature, strong lightweight who can fight from the outside, who can clinch on the inside, wrestle when he needs to, and use his fantastic jiu-jitsu on the floor. He's good everywhere.
Yeah.
Um, so if we're talking like just pure sport, it's Oliveira Poirier all day. But um, that's just not where we're at. I think that more likely we could be looking at, yeah. Poirier takes his money fight. Chandler fights Oliveira, and then we get. I mean, at some point, this lightweight title's got to be up for grabs, right? I mean,
At this point, I mean, it obviously Dana was holding out hope for Khabib. for these two fights. But now that these fights are over with, it is very clear he's not coming back. I mean, we can
That
predict
was
it
so
any.
annoying. That was so annoying. But it was beyond. It just was. The whole thing was ironic, man. The whole thing was about not tying up a division.
Mhm. Yeah.